Hello everyone! Welcome to my channel. I'm Sentra, I'm locked in my house for Snowmageddon and sipping on some espresso and hot tea. Gameplay Design Talks is a series where I analyze a champion's toolkit, their history, and different aspects of their kits to show how well they're designed. My first few episodes on this series have been on a mage, an enchanter, and a mage that's arguably also an enchanter. So today I wanted to break away from that and talk about a marksman, Lucian, the Purifier. Marksmen are strange to do design talks on because many of them are similar both in form and function, and the ones that aren't often go overkill for the sake of being different. I think Lucian is a good middle ground for this, having a distinct kit while still having standard ADC functionality. Now, without further ado, let's get into it.
These wretched abominations blight this world, and every last one of them will perish by my hand.
So here's the thing with Lucian's lore. It isn't really important to know all of it to understand his theme. The lore mostly has to do with how Lucian became a Sentinel of Light, which is the World Protection Secret Society that he works in, how he met his wife Senna, and why he has a vendetta against Thresh. It's a nice read and a cool story, but not reflective of what I'd call his thematic. Thematically speaking, Lucian is a gunslinger that toes the line between cool and edgy. His guns are locked and loaded by his unending icy hot rage, which he channels to do his work killing hordes of undead as a Sentinel of Light. He's freaking awesome, and players playing him should feel awesome when they use him. That's the goal of Lucian's design. You've seen this archetype before in other games, with lots of dashes and speed, dual-wielding guns, wicked strong dueling power, and absolutely zero team support or utility. The type of character that's focused on carrying matches through mechanical prowess. It's a very popular archetype, especially in competitive PvP games like League of Legends. This also isn't to say that you shouldn't read his lore or backstory. It's a great read. I just don't think that it's necessary to break down and understand Lucian's thematic and what archetype of character that he's reflecting. With that all said and done, let's move on to gameplay. Lucian released in August of 2013, which was... hold on. 12 to 13 years ago? Oh dear, I'm old. Well, like many champions Lucian's age, he's had his ups and downs, significant tweaks, and changes to help him fit into whatever League's design and balance framework was. Let's start from his release date then, at how his abilities functioned on release. Lucian's passive is Light Slinger. Whenever Lucian uses an ability, his next basic attack fires twice, with the second shot dealing reduced damage to champions but full damage to minions. This ability is Lucian's engine. It's his whole shtick. It's what sets Lucian apart from other marksmen. This passive makes Lucian the early game, burst damage, and short trade-oriented marksman that he is. With that being said, you still need abilities to activate this passive with, and Lucian has some pretty simple ones. Lucian's Q, Piercing Light, fires a beam of light towards a selected enemy, hitting anything in its path. This ability is great. It gives Lucian some more point-and-click damage to the target that he wants to focus. It gives him poke in lane, which, as a short-range ADC, he needs some reach, and rewards him for really good mid-fight positioning by letting you line up for the shot and hit targets even past your standard range. I like this ability a good bit. It can be a skill shot in function and adds some skill expression to him, while still keeping Lucian's damage consistent and reliable for his desired target. His W is Ardent Blaze. Lucian fires a projectile skill shot that detonates in a cross pattern when it either hits an enemy or reaches its max range, giving a second of vision to the area. Targets hit by the projectile are marked, and when Lucian basic attacks marked enemies, he gets a burst of movement speed. On release, this ability had a 60% bonus AD ratio, so its damage was no slouch. Nowadays, its damage is poor, but it's still another cooldown to proc Light Slinger, speed buff, and generally it's a very valuable utility, but I'll tell you later in the video. His E is Relentless Pursuit. Lucian dashes a short distance, removing all slows currently on him. It's a small, simple ability, at least it was when Lucian first came out, but there's quite a few ways to use an ability like this. It can be used for kiting and chasing, dodging skill shots, lining up Piercing Light, and you can also use it at melee range for an auto reset. These days, it's the heart and soul of Lucian's kit, but back then it had the cooldown of any other old ability. Lucian's ultimate is the Culling. Lucian fires a number of shots in a straight line in front of him, damaging the first enemy hit. It's scaled with AD and attack speed at the time, and not crit chance. He can move, use Relentless Pursuit, and use summoner spells while it channels, but all other abilities, including basic attacks, are locked. There are also two key differences between the release version of this ability and today. One, if Lucian scored a kill or assist while the culling was active, Relentless Pursuit would instantly reset, which was insanely powerful. Also, the number of shots used to scale with level, but now scales with his crit chance. In regards to the design intentions behind Lucian on his release, the sources that I have to pull from are limited, which makes sense because Lucian came out in 2013 and League was only on Season 3 by that point. Riot as a whole had some growing to do, and League wasn't the mass internet sensation from those days. However, because I'm a genius who knows how to use Google's date filter, I found an AMA post from Lucian's dev team on Reddit. First of all, I got hit with some things so old in League's history that even I didn't recognize them. Amount of strength the ability itself was allowed to have due to needing to balance around the best cast, like Pork, Shivs, Iceborne Gauntlet, SOT, what is that? Calling without these items needs to be 20% capacity just because he could build. What is... Lizard? Spirit Lizard. What? Hunter's Mission. It's a jungle item? What the fuck? And second, just skimming through it and reading the gameplay details, I saw how much of a real time capsule that this was. League's design philosophies were really different back when it was still a new game. I'll read you the highlights on gameplay design, but if you want to see all of it for yourself, I'll put the link in the description. Question 1. Any explanation for why Blade of the Ruined King is listed as his essential item, when items like Bloodthirster and Triforce seem to be stronger on him in general? Is attack speed really that strong on Lucian early game? It feels like most thoughts about him at this point revolve around him being more of an AD caster trying to fully utilize his passive in skirmishes. Answer from Riot Scarazard. Lucian scales with so many different stats that it really allows you to customize your playstyle. Builds like IE and Phantom Dancer give you a ton of spike damage with your basic attacks, but leave the culling taking a backseat in terms of your overall damage output. While Bloodthirster, Last Whisper, to make your culling a God mode R, but make your basic attacks weaker than a crit investment. Blade of the Ruined King fits his dueling nature and allows him to outplay his opponent easily, as well as synergizing with Lightslinger. It's not my preferred way to play him, but I think it comes down to there being so many ways to utilize him that none were ever really going to feel like they were the best pick. Okay, first and foremost, Lucian came out in a time when multiple build paths existed, in part because ability power was supposed to fluctuate depending on what you built. Of course, players always find whatever the strongest possible strategy is, but these days, Riot generally prefers that a champion's entire kit feel useful and valuable if you're building along their intended item paths. It's refreshing seeing a marksman that isn't pigeonholed into crit like what every ADC is these days, where Lucian can build crit for good attack damage but worse burst on his abilities, or build raw AD for powerful abilities and a strong ultimate but weaker attacks. Heck, the recommended Riot build path even starts with an on-hit item, encouraging a stronger early and mid-game that works with the organic synergy of how his abilities work, rather than designing the champion's ratios and scalings around the existing item set. Okay, I'm digressing a bit here. Lucian was designed to have multiple viable build paths and have some flexibility and customization into how you, the player, wanted to play him. Multiple AD build paths were viewed as viable, effective builds for marksmen at the time, and Lucian's design reflected that. Now, awesome as that sounds, there's always some caveats. For one, players always find the best build. Even if there is some leniency or flexibility, there are going to always be best-in-slot items that become core to the champion, and if there aren't when they come out, Riot adding in new items or rebalancing the champion will cause something to become core. Riot is then typically forced to balance around whatever the champion's strongest possible build is, which will often hurt their other builds at least somewhat significantly in the process. Furthermore, this is Season 3 League of Legends that we're talking about here. There had to be at least some significant set of changes that have made Lucian into his current crit-only state today, because Riot's philosophy has evolved to a state that marksmen almost always build crit and only crit every match. Okay, I've been on this topic for too darn long. Let's move on. I promise to be faster next time. Question 2. How did you get the idea for the ultimate, The Culling? Answer from Riot Runan. Couple more details. Thematically, we wanted a moment in which Lucian could let loose. All of his other abilities are very focused, precise, and deliberate, and his ultimate, raw emotion breaks through his normally cool and collected personality. So this one gives us a hint at Lucian's thematic a lot here. He is, quote, focused, precise, and deliberate. I think another fitting word is technical. When a player is using Lucian and playing them well, they should believe that they are being precise with his ability timings, with his kit. His dash should make you feel like you chose to go that way in an instant, from a split decision in the moment, etc., etc. However, when you just can't handle it anymore and you need something to die, you press Alt and unleash hell. If every basic ability is like a whisper or a subtle command, his ultimate is a shout. More so a long, shrieking, harrowing cry. Just unloading the whole gosh darn clip into their chest and hoping it works. I'll say that they certainly accomplished that much about Lucian. It's a surprisingly good panic button when you choose fight instead of flight, and it actually alleviates my stress a lot when it works. Okay, question 3 and then I'm done here. Any reason why Lucian's ult doesn't add on-hit effects when that's such a big part of his Lightslinger passive? I think it'd be a buff to put him in a very decent position. Answer from Riot, Skarazard. Pretty much echoing what people have said before, we didn't want to apply on-hits unless there was a strong reason to do so. We've had periods of Lucian's balance where his ult is 80% of the damage he deals to a person he kills, and as such was kind of insane. Imagine getting hit with Frozen Fist or other types of on-hits at the same time. It just came down to a judgment call on our parts. The culling is kind of a numbers-intensive ability when it comes to balance. Adding on-hits into that equation lowers the amount of strength the ability itself is allowed to have due to needing to balance around the best cast. An example build is shown. This kind of build with the culling is insane. Culling without these items needs to be at 20% capacity just because he could build them. Yeah, this tracks. Most on-hit champions that you'll see today don't actually apply on-hit effects to any of their abilities, just new ones on their basic attacks. They might be very strong on-hit effects, or there's Yunara or Twitch who can make their attacks hit multiple people, but it's still only auto attacks. And it makes sense. On-hit isn't a simple stat or linear scaling that you can balance an ability around easily. I mean, wouldn't it be insane if Riot made a champion that can just apply on-hits on nearly every ability? Especially, like, could you imagine, like, an AoE ability or something ultimate level? That'd be crazy. What would they even do with all that extra attack speed? I mean, you could try to make, like, an attack speed scaling, but, like, just giving him on-hits, how would you balance around that? There are so many wildly different on-hit effects now, and I imagine it'd be super toxic too. Like, hold on, I have a picture. Picture this. An ultimate ability where a champion just spams all of their on-hit effects on everyone around them. That's the whole thing. Utter clownery. Utter tomfoolery. Riot's made mistakes, and lots of them, okay, but I can't even imagine a blunder like that happening in League of Legends. What's interesting, though, is that, looking back from question 1, crit used to be like this too. Mainly buffed basic attacks, almost never abilities. Crit ratios were rare, and allowing an ability to crit was treated as something a little sacred. It's a lot of power that you're giving to that ability, and the rest of their kit would have to take a hit to fit the power budget, so it didn't happen often. Nowadays, large swaths of the ADC roster have crit ratios, as well as some other fringe cases that might surprise you. Overall, I think that this early version of Lucian was a successful iteration on what they wanted out of him at the time. He's an insanely high mobility, slippery marksman with very good damage and dueling power. His abilities felt pretty good to use, besides maybe his W, and he had some room for a player to master him and feel rewarded for doing so. He had multiple build paths that accentuated different parts of his kit and was in my opinion a successful launch. However, nothing lasts forever, and certain issues did eventually arise out of Lucian. Mainly, after a quick round of buffs to help his release date, he was just too darn good. The first patch to look to for significant changes was 4.12, which classifies as a small rework by today's standards. Lucian lost 50 attack range, a massive blow, but got some more base AD, health, and movement speed to compensate. His passive just got a bug fix. Piercing Light now does more damage to minions and has a cheaper mana cost, but its range was reduced to match his new basic attack range. The biggest and most lasting change, however, was to Relentless Pursuit. Its cooldown now reduces by 1 second for each hit that he gets from proccing his passive. It now costs 0 mana at all ranks, is an attack reset, and has a shorter base cooldown. In return, his ultimate no longer gets resets on Relentless Pursuit, which, compared to the rest, is honestly nothing. Reading the dev notes on this, our design philosophy when approaching a strong champion is to highlight their strengths while also emphasizing their weaknesses. This mostly relates to the concept of meaningful choices, where we want that champion to maintain their strategic value while also having some trade-off that enemies can play against. Specifically for Lucian, his high generic power, a strong early and late game, high burst, high mobility, etc., meant he could just be blindly picked without much consideration for the enemy team. For a while, this is what made Lucian such a strong competitive pick. He could adapt to any team and could still perform well. Ultimately, our changes are focused on highlighting some of Lucian's strengths as a spell-slinging mobile marksman, while also emphasizing new weaknesses, like having a lower range. At higher levels with some items, like namely cooldown reduction, Lucian can fluidly chain E's together as long as he has a target to hit with his passive. This also means Lucian will be one of the most mobile mid-range ADCs in team fights. There are some concerns that he'll be too mobile thanks to E removing all slows, but we'll keep a close eye here. Breaking the reading for a second. They should have absolutely removed that as soon as this launched. Holy wow. Having a lower range, however, also means Lucian will need to take more risks in order to get E's cooldown back up, and he might have some tougher matchups during the laning phase, where before he could win almost any lane. This gives us a lot more space to emphasize Lucian's unique traits, and we'll be watching how he performs after these changes. You can tell that this is old League of Legends, because they dropped this weeks before the World Championships were starting. It shows too, looking back on the champion stats that year, because Lucian was the highest presence ADC in the game at a 78% pick ban rate. Obviously, this got nerfed. It got nerfed a lot, and it got nerfed very fast. Next patch, they removed Relentless Pursuit's ability to cleanse slows. Oh yeah, again, I need to mention this, it could still cleanse slows, by the way, and they reverted the cooldown buff. On 4.18, they then added the mana cost back to it, having it scale down to 0 with its ability rank. Immediately after, on 4.19, his ultimate cooldown got increased and Ardent Blaze got a slightly higher movement speed buff, but its AD ratio was completely removed. It exists purely for its utility now. The last change that seems to finally balance this iteration of Lucian, for a while, was 4.21, where his passive second attack got its damage changed to be weaker at low levels, scaling up to its old number later in the game. They also cut the time he had to use his passive in half, and then that's it. There's nothing for a while. This iteration already looks a lot more like today's Lucian than his first iteration, and to be honest, I viewed his E resetting as something so natural and core to his kit that I believed it had always been there before I started recording this video. It's hard to imagine Lucian without it even, but I digress. The next biggest patch for Lucian came late in Season 5 on the infamous Juggernaut update in patch 5.16. Don't worry though, Lucian didn't ruin Season 5's worlds. In fact, he wasn't even looked at and had about a 1% presence, but trust me, this patch was still somewhat significant for him. The biggest changes to see, putting number adjustments aside, was that Lucian's passive now always did full damage to minions, which made wave clear and farming way easier and more consistent. The second shot on his passive had its damage scaling changed so that it happened a little bit faster, and at level 16 it could go even higher than its old 50% total damage. Finally, and this one is major, his allies can now attack enemies to proc the movement speed on Ardent Blaze for him, which helped him a lot for following up on engages, or allowing him to run away from enemies while an ally peeled for him. Lucian still has this mechanic today, and nowadays it's something that's done a lot to tie him to bot lane. 5.22 then, with some hefty compensation buffs, sees the removal of his ultimate's attack speed scaling, which of course came with hefty changes to what stats he wants and therefore what his best items would be. Attack speed still makes his passive feel a lot more fluid, but it's definitely far inferior to AD now. I'm going to skip over a lot of changes now, because this was more or less Lucian's state now. He saw simple buffs and nerfs, nothing of lasting significance, spare for maybe the scariest patch for ADCs in League of Legends history, but that's not Lucian exclusive. Now, in this state, Lucian seemed fine for a while, but near the end of 2020, pro play came back for Lucian as a flex pick. Lucian became highly valuable as an ADC who could be flexed mid. mainly because it's rare for ADC champions to ever be pro-level viable in multiple roles. He ended Worlds with over an 80% pick ban presence, and going onto League of Graphs, if you filter Lucian's pick rate for mid lane only, you'll see almost exactly when this happened. Furthermore, Lucian mid had committed the worst crime imaginable. Or, at least it's the worst crime if you ask Reddit. Lucian was extremely annoying and frustrating to play against as a mid laner. He was something of a lane bully. High mobility made landing skill shots on him very hard. And, if you recall, part of his initial design philosophy was to be a strong duelist marksman, making him fantastic at those classic mid lane 1v1s with his short trade pattern and front-loaded burst damage. Lucian dwindled down to somewhere between a 4 or 5% pick rate in solo queue, in part because of nerfs, and so he wasn't overbearing in play rate anymore, but he was still very strong as a mid laner in pro play. People were upset. Riot tried their best, but it just was really difficult to deal with how blatantly oppressive he was in pro play, and even solo queue players were still annoyed with him even when he was weak. So, in 2021, patch 11.17, Lucian received a mid-scope update. Before I show you, I want to read some of the article that they published in regards to this update. It gives a lot of great insights into how the dev team designs a rework of this scale, and, given that I think it was a very successful rework, I think it's quite smart to listen to it. I'll leave a link in the description as well for any who are interested. Hey everyone, I'm here to talk about a small Lucian update coming your way in 11.17. First, a quick TLDR of the changes. Solo lane early damage is slightly down. Lucian gains bonus on hit damage when buffed by allies, including the movement speed from his W. R damage shifted to scale better with crit, but starts at lower base damage. Lucian's been quite weak in regular play for most of Season 11 in all of his roles, bot, mid, and occasionally top. We don't mind when a character is flexible in a variety of roles as long as their counterplay is maintained, and actually think it adds valuable depth to the character. However, problems start to appear when less played roles have much higher win rates than the most played role, and we have to nerf a champion for being too strong in a place where most players aren't interested in playing them. One noteworthy version of this is when an alternate role dominates in pro play, leading to the main role being limited in regular play. Lucian falls into the latter. Despite mid lane having a lower win rate than bot lane in most skill bans, whenever Lucian is viable in solo queue, he quickly starts to dominate mid lane picks and bans in pro play. This means that without a way to buff Lucian only in bot, his bot power in regular play is bound by his mid power in coordinated play. We wanted to fully understand why pros value Lucian mid so much, despite his weak performance in regular play. After asking our game analysis team of former analysts, pros, and high MMR players, the answer boiled down to these things. Pros value early power better. Pros can intentionally draft mixed damage compositions to offset the lack of an AP mid, and Lucian's ultimate is a powerful solo lane tool where there's more room to be aggressive and fewer people to body block it. After understanding the core reasons why Lucian is more powerful in coordinated play, we moved on to seeing how we could address some of these points to hit the ultimate goal of the project. Give power to Lucian bot without Lucian mid and Lucian top dominating pro play. Explorations centered on the most obvious difference between the lanes. Bot lane Lucian almost always has a support. Our first pass tried to gate Lucian's early power by increasing his mana costs. On the flip side, if Lucian was laning with an ally, he'd get even more mana, letting him spam Q and E and run loose in the bot lane. There was even a wacky iteration where Lucian would restore mana to himself and an ally, leading to hilarious tests where supports like Taric Lulu would have unlimited mana to pump buffs into Lucian. However, there was a core problem here. Lucian isn't always with an ally all game. While bot lane has two people, there are many cases where Lucian wants to split push since he can win so many duels. And that independence is a core part of why players love Lucian. Goal 2 became, rather than make Lucian feel bad without being near an ally, make him feel even better with an ally in ways that he won't miss dearly when playing more independently. This brings up a critical third goal. Lucian is already incredibly fun, he's just a bit weak. We're not aiming to reinvent the wheel and create complex rules and hooks that take away from Lucian's core appeal. Sometimes simple is all that's needed. Keeping this in mind, we landed on granting Lucian bonus damage whenever buffed by an ally. This version creates a new avenue for supports to help Lucian bully enemies early game, and also doesn't warp Lucian's spell spamming, highly mobile pattern. With some new power to snowball a lead in bot lane, Lucian can remain a more relevant threat before he begins falling off during the endgame. Lastly, there's Lucian's ultimate, an ability that scales heavily with levels, which comes faster in solo lanes. That extra XP means solo Lucian gets his ult earlier than bot Lucian too, so it impacts a longer portion of lane phase. Threatening to kill level 6 opponents from pretty high health is also a big part of how solo lane Lucian can completely take over a lane. To solve this, we shifted one of the culling scalings, which is the number of bullets, from experience-based to item-based, which is more consistent between lanes. This way, bot Lucian doesn't have to wait until levels 11 and 16 for his next spike in ultimate damage. Also, watching the culling blast more bullets as you get more items is pretty freaking cool. After a few more touches on base stats and visual effects, Lucian should have a few more tools to help him feel better about heading to the bot lane while still sticking close to his independent gunslinger identity. Now, to show you what the actual patch had in store for Lucian. Lucian lost a little base AD just to start on tapping down his level 1 traits. He got an addition to his passive where he got bonus magic damage whenever an ally buffs him with one of their abilities, like with a heal or a shield, to add some more synergy with enchanter picks. Ardent Blaze got a little cheaper, and his new passive damage buff now applies when allies damage people marked by it. The culling got a little less base damage, a slightly higher AP ratio, and the number of shots that it fires now scales with Lucian's crit instead of levels. This was definitely too powerful at launch, but once reined in with the necessary bug fixes and balance changes, it's landed Lucian in a much healthier and happier spot. Losing the level scaling on his ultimate now means that mid lane Lucian isn't getting an obvious advantage over bot lane with that bonus experience. Losing the level scaling on his ultimate now means that mid lane Lucian isn't getting an obvious advantage over bot lane Lucian with that bonus experience. The damage buff that he gets from allies is also nice, but not big enough for him to make a fuss when his support goes out roaming. It also doesn't technically make Lucian mid unplayable, it's just a new balancing lever that lets Riot buff bot lane Lucian without really affecting mid lane Lucian. Most importantly though, he's very much still Lucian. He's still a strong duelist and a strong early game lane bully, he's just tethered to a role where he's tolerated and more players play him now. Okay, some more small balance changes aside, we've caught up to modern Lucian. Is he any good? Let's break it down. Let's start out by addressing the elephant in the room. Lucian is incredibly fun for his target audience, and it has a broad appeal. This is something that's been true from launch to today. Lucian is exciting, his abilities feel great, and you can really get in the zone playing this guy. I've found from my Lucian games that I lost a lot, in part because I'm bad at piloting the late game with him, but I have such a blast getting scrappy in laning phase that I don't mind losing all that much. Very few champions are capable of being that enjoyable. Lucian is also quite unique amongst the ADC roster, even now, but especially when he launched. He still does most of his damage in his basic attacks, but he's a proper ability weaver that still leans on his abilities to get any of his damage out. His distinctive lack of utility also acts as a clear pain point for him, helping to balance him out a bit. Even most traditional marksmen have at least a slow. Lucian gets mobility instead. Lastly, Lucian's skill expression is phenomenal, 5 out of 5 stars. Not only does he reward a mastery of animation cancels, which can take many matches to fully grasp, but his kit makes him make a lot of split-second decisions in a fight. The culling and relentless pursuit can also be used in numerous different ways each, and I often feel like Lucian is giving me so many tools to handle a situation, even though I haven't mastered them yet. For what Lucian struggles with design-wise, his identity as an early-centric, highly mobile marksman makes him volatile. He's feast or famine, which many marksmen kinda are, but him to a higher degree, especially since he can't ever fall back on that reliable scaling DPS of other ADCs. Lucian also has issues in counterplay. He's extremely oppressive into the lanes that he counters and has means to trade from under tower without taking damage. If he has an engaged tank support, you can bet money on a lethal tower dive at some point, and his scaling improves with an enchanter, while their shields or heals let him trade even harder under tower with less consequences. Overall though, I'd say Lucian has landed at an A+ in game design. He started off with a fun and dynamic kit, and back in Season 3, no less. Season 4 added even more of the fast and flashy gameplay that he's known for, and his mid-scope update was a brilliant take on how to tie a champion to a duo lane without making it feel bad. He might be kind of annoying to fight against, but come on, there's worse out there, both in the ADC role and out of it. Alright, that wraps up Lucian the Purifier. Lucian was a very fun challenge for me because he's the first subject that I hadn't personally played or learned before making a video on them. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I enjoyed making it. If you did, why not like and subscribe? If you would also like to see me do a gameplay design talk, feel free to comment who you'd like to see down below. Alright, that's all. See you in the next one. Bye!